Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayatmudire Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha Namo Pankajanaphaya Namo Pankajamaline Namo Pankajanetraya Namaste Pankajantahe. So today we're reading from Canto 3, which is Status Quo, Chapter 6, which is Creation of Universal Form. We'll be reading texts 26, 27, and 28. So starting with 26. Sattvam chasya vinirbhinnam mahandishnyam upavishat chittam shena sau vijnanam pratipadyate. Translation by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Thereafter, when his consciousness separately manifested itself, the total energy, Mahat Tattva, entered with his conscious part. Thus, the living entity is able to conceive specific knowledge. We go on to the next one. 27. Shishnosyadyurdhara vadpyam kamnabhe upapadyata gunanam vrittayo yeshu pratiyante suradaya. Translation. Thereafter, from the head of the gigantic form, the heavenly planets were manifested, and from his legs, the earthly planets, and from his abdomen, the sky separately manifested themselves. Within them, the demigods and others also were manifested in terms of the modes of material nature. So again, no purport. We'll go on to the next one. Text 28. Atyantikena satvena divam deva prapedire dharam raja swabhavena anayo yecha tan anu. So this has purpose. We'll go through the synonyms as well, word to word. Atyantikena, excessive. Satvena, by the mode of goodness. Devam, in the higher planets. Devaha, the demigods. Prapedhire, have been situated. Dharam, on the earth. Raja, the mode of passion. Swabhavena, by nature. Panaya, the human being. Ye, all those. Cha, also. Tan, there. Anu, subordinate. So translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The demigods, qualified by their super excellent quality of the mode of goodness, are situated in the heavenly planets, whereas the human beings, because of their nature in the mode of passion, live on the earth in company with their subordinates. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita 14.14 and 14.15, it is said that those who are highly developed in the mode of goodness are promoted to the higher heavenly planetary system. And those who are overpowered by the mode of passion are situated in the middle planetary systems, the Earth and similar planets. But those who are surcharged with the mode of ignorance are degraded to the lower planetary systems or to the animal kingdom. The demigods are highly developed in the mode of goodness, and thus they are situated in the heavenly planets. Below human beings are the animals. Although some of them mingle with human society, like cows, horses, dogs, etc., are habituated to living under the protection of human beings. The word atyantikena is very significant in this verse. By development of the mode of goodness of material nature, one can become situated in the heavenly planets. But by excessive development of the modes of passion and ignorance, the human being indulges in killing the animals who are meant to be protected by mankind. Persons who indulge in unnecessary animal killing have excessively developed in the modes of passion and ignorance and have no hope of advancing to the mode of goodness. They are destined to be degraded to lower statuses of life. The planetary systems are calculated as upper and lower in terms of the classes of living entities who live there. So we'll invoke the Mangalacharan prayers before we start. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatadine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivashadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Welcome to this morning's Bhagavatam discussion. I actually am completely unqualified, especially in this very technical section of the cosmic creation and the universal form. But nevertheless, I take the opportunity to glorify the Bhagavatam and the Lord completely for my purification, especially in this Purushottam Mass. So I ardently seek the blessings of my Guru Maharaj and all of you assembled devotees, so I may speak something of some value. So we are actually in a very, technical part, right? A very mind-boggling part of the Bhagavatam, the cosmic creation, the creation of the universal form. So it's definitely not like the Leelas, right? The pastimes that we relish and are somewhat easier to understand. So creation of the universal form, right? This creation was triggered, as we've been hearing, is triggered by prayers, right? Prayers of the demigods. In the previous chapter, we learned that the demigods, once all these elements, the sense objects, the senses are created, as well as the demigods, but the controlling deities are there for all of these elements, but they are unable to perform their universal deities because they don't know what to do, right? And so they offer these beautiful prayers to Karanada Kashaya Vishnu. They take shelter of the Lord's lotus feet, where they start with, your lotus feet are like an umbrella for the surrendered soul, by which all miseries are thrown away. And then they pray for enlightenment and direction, so that they can hear the Lord's direction and are able to understand and render the services for which they have been created. So this is at the end of the prayers by the demigods is where chapter 6 starts. And Maitreya Muni is explaining to Vidura that when the Lord sees that the process of creation is suspended because nobody knows what to do next, the Supreme Lord hears those prayers and he expands himself into two additional forms. One is Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, the super soul, where the Lord sends his energy as as Paramatma into all the elements, all the atoms, right, into everything. And also, gradually, the Virat Rupa is manifested. Now, once that happens, right, once the Lord enters into every element and the Virat Rupa appears, all the different demigods become enlivened, and are able to perform their activities. So everything starts to animate, right? So once again, we understand, and that nothing really happens without a touch of the Lord, like the Supreme Lord. His touch is everywhere. So in the last few verses, we've been hearing that from the Virat Rupa, as the different parts separate, the living entities, are able to function with those parts as well. So we've heard that, because the Lord can see or hear or smell, that's why we are able to. And then we've heard that, the gross organ, like the mouth, which manifests as the Adhibhuta. With that, the controlling deity, Agni, manifests. The subtle organ for that is voice, and the activity that living entities are able to perform is expressed with speech. So similarly, we've gone through all the various parts of the body. Yesterday we read about I think intelligence, heart, and ego manifesting. So today's verse 26, is about the consciousness, right? So it says that the consciousness is manifested, is separately manifested, and into that the controlling deity Mahatattva enters with his consciousness, with his conscious part, right? Chitta Amsena, his conscious part, and then the living entity is able to conceive specific knowledge. So just to draw a relationship with something that with some of the other organs that, at least for me, I'm able to kind of understand better. Eyes, for example, right? Eyes are the gross organ, or Adhibhuta. The controlling deity we heard is Surya. The subtle sense organ related to that is eyesight, and the tanmatra, or the activity that it enables us to see various forms. So if we draw a correlation, in the case of consciousness is the gross organ. The controlling deity, or Adhidaiva, is total energy, or Mahatattva. The subtle organ is Chitta, or the conscious part. Prabhupada, of course, has translated Chitta to heart, in some places mind as well. So, but what is the activity that the living entity can do? They can conceive specific knowledge. Okay. So in Canto 2, where we've heard about, that speaks about the Virat Rupa as well, it says that the consciousness of that great personality is the abode of religious principles. And that consciousness is also the abode of truth and transcendental knowledge. So the consciousness is the abode of religious principles, abode of truth and transcendental knowledge. Now, this consciousness, or Chitta, is the one, right? This consciousness has been covered. We hear about that as well in the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita, that after many, many lives of conditioning, this consciousness is covered with miles of dust, right? Mahaprabhu says in his Shikshashtakam, Cheto Darpana Marjanam Bhavamahadavagni Nirvapanam. So to get out of this Mahadavagni, the blazing fire of material existence, Mahaprabhu says, we have to clean that mirror of our heart, of Chitta. Get our consciousness in the right place, right? And the impressions are so thick. I mean, generally, if you look at a mirror and there's, just a light dusting of whatever, dust or it's hard to see, right? The picture is hazy. But if you think about, about an inch of dust over a mirror, it'll be, sometimes, I mean, we won't even be able to understand that it's a mirror. It may look just like a board, But if we run our finger through it, something gets cleared, right? And we can see ourselves a little bit. So, there's some clarity. But imagine miles of dust, that's definitely cannot be cleared out just by a simple, brush with the hand. It needs a lot of something much stronger, right? Much more powerful. And that stronger thing is the chanting of the holy name of Krishna, right? As well as reading the Bhagavatam, reading the Bhagavad Gita, the scriptures that have been provided to us. And so Mahaprabhu says, Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. That's the only way of removing, of coming out of that Mahabhavagni, right? And quenching that fire. So let's move on to the next verse, verse 27. So in verse 27, creation is continuing. And so it talks about, from the head of the gigantic form, the heavenly planets manifest. From the legs, the earth, and in between the two, from the abdomen, the sky is manifested. And the inhabitants of these different locations, these different planetary systems that are manifested, is based on the modes of nature. So within them, the demigods and the others also manifest in terms of the modes of material nature. So we see that right from creation, there is variety and discrimination, right? In our experience, right, in our living experience, and we often see that there is discrimination for sure, right? We often see that discrimination is driven by either wealth, right, or maybe some very specific talent, right, a great singer or something, but largely wealth at the end of the day. So we see like billionaires like Ambani's, right? They get to live in 27th floor house. I mean, imagine a 27th floor house called whatever, Antilia or something, with who knows how many rooms and, bedecked with jewels and whatnot. So many car garages, so many floors of car garages, so many cars and whatnot. And then in the same city, a little distance away, the poor live in a place called Dharavi, which is the slums of Mumbai. Right? So this is, what the material universe, I mean, we're talking about the material universe. So clearly, right from creation, even from creation, everything cannot be expected to be equal, or, that equanimity cannot be expected. So there are higher planets, there are lower planets. And what determines who gets to enjoy which, the way it is defined is not wealth in this case, of course, but by the material modes of nature. So the people, the entities that are in the higher modes get to stay in the higher planets, and those entities are the demigods. So that brings us to the last verse for today. Atyantikena satvena. So, So Atyantikena satvena, which means the demigods who are qualified with excessive modes of goodness live in the higher planets. Now we know that the modes, are not really steady, right? Most, living entities are in mixed modes. But even in a day, I mean, it's divided by the modes. In the morning, we are in mode of goodness. In the evening, at night, we are in deep ignorance, and something in between throughout the day. So this verse is saying that humans are generally in the mode of passion, but for the demigods, their mode is predominantly the super excellent quality of the mode of goodness. And therefore, they live in the heavenly planets. And Prabhupada says that those who are overpowered by the mode of passion are situated in the middle planetary system, the Earth, right? And that's us. And who are surcharged with the mode of ignorance are degraded to the lower planetary system or to the animal planet. Right? So below the human beings are the animals. Although some do mingle with human society, like the cows, horses, etc., and are habituated to living under the protection of the human beings. Now, the thing is that, although these animals live under the protection of human beings, a lot of human beings, in excessive modes of passion and ignorance, kill those same animals that are supposed to be under our protection. And for what? Largely to eat their flesh. It sounds so terrible, right? I used to have a colleague in Chicago itself. She used to live in some rural part in India, and they had many acres of land. And she and her husband and their family, initially I came to know that they do farming. Okay, they do farming. They as well as some agriculture. They grow like corn and stuff, and also they rear cows and sheep and horses. So sometimes she would show a picture of a newborn calf or a horse that is injured and how they're looking after it and whatnot. So when I heard, initially when I saw those and I heard about that, I was like, wow, that's so nice. And it's a totally different kind of life. And she used to work remotely in IT itself, some security admin or something she used to. But then I learned that once the calves grow to an adult, they sell them off to slaughterhouses. I was like, what? Imagine rearing a cow, developing a bond and relationship with them, taking care of them, and then sending them off to be killed. But apparently that's what their business is. So anyway, that was so shocking to me. And cows in particular, right? Our in our Varnashram Dharma, there's a whole section of the society. Just as Kshatriya's responsibility is to protect the human beings, the Vaishya's main occupation is Goraksha, right? Krishi, Goraksha, Vanijya. That's how important cows are. Yet, as we know, in this demonic society, cow killing is so rampant. So Prabhupada says here that persons who indulge in an unnecessary animal killing have excessively developed in the modes of passion and ignorance and have no hope of advancing to the modes of goodness. They are destined to be degraded to lower statuses of life. And of course, he has mentioned these two verses, 14:14 and 14:15, where it talks about what happens to a person who is in the mode of goodness after he dies, right? In the different modes after they die. So mode of goodness attains the higher planets of the great sages. Those situated in mode of goodness, it is higher planets. In mode of passion, he takes birth amongst those engaged in fruitive activities. And when one dies in mode of ignorance, it takes birth in the animal kingdom. So there's 14:14 and 14:15 that Prabhupada has referred to. And then, of course, we have the famous verse 14:18 from Bhagavad Gita. It says, Urdhvam gacchati satvastha madhye tishtanti rajasa jaganya guna vrittistha adho gachanti tamasa. So those situated in mode of goodness gradually go upward to the higher planets. Those in the mode of passion live on in the earthly planets. And those in the abominable mode of ignorance go down to the hellish worlds. So in Bhagavad Gita, also in chapter 17, the various qualities of people and, what are their activities in the various modes is explained. I mean, most of us have seen it, but just as a quick refresher, maybe we can take a quick look. So it says, the men, text 7 says, men in mode of goodness worship demigods, those in mode of passion worship the demons, and then those in mode of ignorance worship ghosts and spirits. Similarly, there is classification of food, right? People that, foods that are, even the food each person prefers is of three kinds, according to the three modes of material nature. Similarly, sacrifices, austerities, charities, the kind of charities that a person engages in determines what mode a person is in. Right? So foods dear to those in the mode of goodness increases the duration of life, purifies one's existence, gives strength, health, happiness, and satisfaction. Such foods are juicy, fatty, wholesome, and pleasing to the heart. And then those that are bitter, too sour, salty, hot, pungent, dry, and burning are dear to those in the mode of passion. They cause distress, misery, and disease. And then food that is more than 3 hours, has been prepared more than 3 hours before being eaten, that's tasteless, decomposed, and putrid, consisting of remnants and untouchable things, is dear to those in the mode of darkness. And then down here is about charity. A lot of times we have questions about, should we do this kind of charity or not? Text 20, it talks about charity given out of duty without expectation of return at the proper time and place, and to a worthy person is considered to be in the mode of goodness, and so on. So we can, read through this once again if we are confused about which, what to do. The thing is that for a devotee of Krishna, though, mode of goodness, right, is not the ultimate goal, right? And we've heard about the analogy of the airport, and the flight many times, right? So coming to the mode of goodness is like reaching the airport. So if you want to fly out, say you want to go to Vrindavan, you have to reach the airport, and that's like, getting to the mode of goodness. However, to go from Chicago to Vrindavan, you have to catch a flight, right? And that is, one has to engage in devotional service and basically transcend the modes of material nature, because even the mode of goodness is entangling, right? It is binding, and most importantly, it's risk prone. Anytime you can somehow get overcome by modes of passion and ignorance and fall, to lower states. So it's, the only risk-free way of getting out of this cycle is bhakti yoga, and Krishna talks about that in 1426. So mamcha yoga picharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samaputyetan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. It says, one who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature, and thus comes to the level of Brahman. So this Krishna says in response to Arjuna's question, which was, what is the means of attaining that transcendental position? So the whole world, is under the modes of nature, and Krishna is saying that one should not be disturbed by those modes, but rather put one's consciousness into the activities which were called bhakti yoga, right? Krishna related, consciousness into Krishna's activities. And Prabhupada further explains here that if one engages himself in the service of Krishna or his plenary expansions with unfailing determination, although these modes of material nature are very difficult to overcome, one can overcome them easily. This has been explained in the 7th chapter, at 7.14, we know. So one who surrenders unto Krishna at once surmounts the influence of the modes of material nature. To be in Krishna consciousness or in devotional service means to acquire equality with Krishna. The Lord says that his nature is eternal, blissful, and full of knowledge, and the living entities are part and parcel of the Supreme, as gold particles are part of a gold mine. Therefore, the living entity in his spiritual position is as good as gold, as good as Krishna in quality. So our path is very clear. Time just in 500 years ago, as recently as 500 years ago, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has very clearly spelled out the path to us, right? That Harinam is the way. So so let's stay on it, right? With especially on this Purushottam Mass, where the benefits of all devotional services multifold. Let's stay on that track. Listen to Mahaprabhu, all the direction given by Krishna. So with that, I will stop. Thank you very much. Sorry if I've misspoken anything. My depth of philosophy and stuff was not very much, but I'm grateful that I have, somehow, Lakshmikant Prabhu gives me this opportunity. Before I open up, though, I would like to, together, we know that Sajisudha Prabhu is going through a surgery today, a difficult thing. So if we can all maybe chant one round of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra for his benefit. You can unmute if you want. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare.
Thank you very much. So please add or correct.
Hare Krishna Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. Mataji, wonderful class, so detailed, and you actually touched upon connecting to Bhagavad Gita, particularly, the three modes and, what happens to the living entity, passing into another body based on the modes, as well as the charity, how we do charity, was really touching. And that is one thing, reading Srimad Bhagavatam, if we continue to connect to Bhagavad Gita, it's so useful. And thank you for doing that. Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, actually, Srila Prabhupada has done that. He's connected that verse to 14 and 14:15. And it's always interesting to see where do I stand, right? To look at Krishna's instructions and what Krishna has said in Bhagavad Gita, and of course the elaborate purpose given by Prabhupada. So helps us from a practical standpoint as well.
Yeah, Mataji, that's true. I do have one question, but it's not really directed at what you spoke today or the verses for today. But overall, if when we go further, we read that creation, there are two parts to creation. One is sarga and the other one is visarga. And if I understand this properly, visarga is the time when Brahma actually gets down to, create the three divisions of the planetary systems and then make it into 14 planetary systems. And then he gives, rise to the demigods, and by putting them into the proper bodies and stuff like that. That being the case, the previous chapter actually ends with the demigods unable to perform properly, seek direction and blessings from the Lord. And then the Lord actually, it is said, is glancing upon the Mahat Tattva, so it starts mixing again, and then the Hiranyagarbha is created. Whereas all the Visarga is supposed to happen within the Hiranyagarbha. So I'm a little mixed up. I don't know if it is, I'm just, I've been struggling with this question for about 3-4 days now. I just brought it out, that's all, Mataji.
Yeah, the sequence of events, right? And the demigods and their existence before Brahma's creation. Yeah. I know it's a little confusing, but what I understand is, the controlling deities. And I think, I don't know if you had asked the question before as well, Prabhu, or where I had heard maybe Maharaj had explained, and if I even recall correctly, but the controlling deities, also exist in the spiritual realm, is I think what I had heard. And it is their counterpart, so to say, in the material universe are the ones that are, the demigods that we talk about, right? That, I mean, I don't know, again, it's very complex. I mean, especially for me, it's a little too much. So I'm not absolutely sure, but I think that's something along those lines is what I remember.
Okay, Mataji. Thank you so much. I had not heard about this earlier. Thank you so much, Mataji. It helps.
Yeah, you're right, Mathaji. Actually, I think recent class also Maharaj mentioned when he visited, right? I mean, when he was talking on the sequence of these verses, I think that is when his verse started. I mean, the sequence started, this prototype demigods. I mean, they are from the spiritual world.
Yeah.
Right? So they are not the demigods that we.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you for asking that, Prabhu, because it helped me to remember that to some extent. Yeah. Thank you, Lakshmi.
That 26th verse, Mataji, I didn't get that. Thereafter, when his consciousness separately manifested itself, total energy Mahatattva entered with his conscious part. Living entity is able to conceive specific knowledge.
Yeah. So that is
Mahatattva is the demigod here, huh? I mean, controlling deity.
Controlling deity. Yeah, that's the way it is explained, Prabhu. Even in Subodhani, it's for all of the other organs, right? For example, the eyes, we see that Surya is the controlling deity, and Surya enters with eyesight, and then the living entities are able to see. Similarly, mouth, so Agni enters, and voice is manifested, and living entities can express with speech. So similarly, consciousness is separated from the Virat Rupa, and Mahat Tattva is the deity, apparently controlling deity that enters into it with his Chittamshena, so with his part of consciousness. And then the living entity is able to conceive knowledge with their consciousness. I know it's really mind-boggling, this whole section.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
You then, there isn't anything else. We'll end for the day. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhaiva cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo. Yantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanand Hari Hari.
Hari Krishna.